the EU is about to drastically simplify the sustainability reporting landscape with the EU Omnibus regulation. Seth, can you give us a bit of a taster of what that is?
Yeah, so Omnibus is basically, there has been a push that is not new, actually. There's been a sort of a movement within the European community to tone down, refine CSRD requirements. And this is not something that's happened just in the last couple of months or even couple of years. Like, we've been hearing about this since well before CSRD was approved, where there was just so much back and forth and so much talk of the onerous nature, let's say, of the CSRD requirements and how this should be limited and made easier and so on and so forth. And the movement has been particularly strong from Germany and from a few other actors in the EU as well. And where we now are landing is that in the current environment where you have massive trade tension potentially between the US and Europe, there's a big incentive to actually now change the sort of CSRD requirements, narrow the scope, simplify the reporting, and so on. So if I kind of reflect on what the big changes are, we're looking at a 25% reduction in reporting requirements for larger companies, and we're looking at a 35% reduction for smaller ones. So a lot of smaller suppliers to large companies are just getting carved out of some reporting requirements. Mid-cap companies, which have 250 to 1,500 employees, are going to have a lot lighter obligations. Some disclosures are going to become optional. And there's also the potential that's been introduced for some deadline extensions of 1 to 2 years. And then the big thing is probably also just merging CSRD, CSDDD, and EU taxonomy into a single framework. I think that some of this is net positive. I'm going to start with the positives. I think some of this is net positive, which is I actually think it is very helpful to merge CSRD, CSDDD, and EU taxonomy. I think there was a lot of confusion and just overlaps. And frankly, I think we can all agree that in general, more streamlined regulation, more streamlined, simpler reporting requirements are better as long as we don't compromise pace of change and momentum and so on. I think it is in everyone's interest for this to just be easier for business. When it comes to excluding these smaller or mid-cap companies that are 250 to 1,500 employees, I don't think that the inclusion of these companies or exclusion is going to move the needle a huge amount. And I say that for two reasons. One is often these companies are not very impactful anyway. Often they might even be like service businesses, just not very emissions heavy. The ones that are higher emissions intensity, I actually think will end up being captured anyway, either by virtue of voluntary disclosures by their investors, their customers, or by required disclosures and the momentum that creates from their investors and their customers and so on. So I think we'll end up seeing some of those companies indirectly captured anyway, and other companies not that impactful. I think there is a piece around how much does this change the urgency with which the larger companies, let's exclude those small mid-caps now for a moment, does this impact the pace of change that the larger companies were going for? I don't know. I think we're going to see. I think this is still an evolving piece. I think there's still a lot of speculation on whether there's going to be more than this, more than what's conceived. I think it's going to be something we're going to have to keep an eye on. From the conversations I've had with food businesses, at least when I speak with sustainability teams and leaders in their organizations, I do see a general step back is maybe a big framing, but I would say that most of the players that fall into two camps, either those that are very US centric or those that are a little smaller, tend to be consolidating what they're doing on sustainability as a result of the current political and regulatory environment. What that means is that they are planning to talk about stuff less and planning to maybe do fewer things. They may still be planning to do those few things to the same extent. So if they were running a region ag program and it was a serious program for them, maybe they're still doing the same program to the same extent, but they're actually saying we're not going to go out of our way to try and redesign how packaging is used in our organization, for example. Like they might just be having fewer things on the menu. And I think that that's also just, in some ways a good thing. More focus, more pragmatism can be a good thing. I think it's not the pace of change that any environmentalist would want. I think we'd all like, from a system level, more pressure to change rather than less.